In my time as an equity analyst covering the airline industry, it's occurred to me that people have an instinctive need to travel. I've fielded a lot of questions recently about whether the COVID-19 pandemic has permanently harmed this industry. But my view of the future is quite positive. I believe people will always need to travel and explore the world, whether for pleasure, for business, or to see loved ones. But in the near term, this industry has to deal with some hard realities. The pandemic has brought uncertainty, weakened demand, and has driven a labor shortage. So I wanted to talk with Gary Kelly, CEO of Southwest Airlines. In his storied 17-year career, Gary has led Southwest out of numerous disruptions, including 9/11, the 2008 global financial crisis, and more. So who better to talk to about leading during uncertainty and what the future of this industry looks like than Gary? I sat down with him recently at the company's headquarters in Dallas. Gary, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's an honor to be here, and thank you for coming all the way to Texas.
You've worked at Southwest for 35 years, 17 of them as CEO. How has the airline industry changed today versus when you first started out?
When I started in '86, we were very small. I think we had at Southwest Airlines maybe 60 airplanes. It's just very different today. Far more automation. The world has changed, in 35 years, and the industry's changed right along with that. But the other thing that's been fun to not just watch but be a part of is how disruptive Southwest ended up being over this time period. So in those days, we were the only low-fare airline, and far cheaper fares than anyone else. And as you would expect over time, there's a lot of copying of our business model. So the fare competition is a lot more fierce today.
Your tenure as CEO alone has seen a number of disruptive events, whether it was global oil crises, 9/11, the global financial crisis, the MAX disruption, and now a global pandemic. I don't know if this is possible to answer, but which one was the most challenging to deal with as CEO?
By far it was the pandemic,
Right.
Simply because our business was nil. Until the pandemic, we never had an annual loss since our earliest days. And it's just a testament to the business model, but also the resilience of our people to fight through these challenges.
How do you navigate a nearly $30 billion company with 50,000 employees through uncertainty like this?
I think the realization hit me in late February of 2020. I was at a CEO event and just talking in person, talking directly with other CEOs and hearing what was going on around the world and hearing more firsthand how rapidly this was spreading. I got very alarmed. So I came back, and at that point, we hadn't really seen an impact on our business until that next week. By mid-March, our business was down almost 95%.
Wow.
And that was just breathtaking. It was just so fast, so sharp, and so painful. And then what do? We were prepared as one can be. Strong balance sheet, plenty of cash. We had sensible commitments. We were just confident that we were going to figure this out. It really was a matter of working with the federal government to understand what kind of liquidity it was going to provide to our country, not just for our industry.
Right.
Because we needed people to fly. They could give us money, but if no one's going to fly, what difference does it make? You just liquidate. We introduced the Southwest Promise. We scrubbed every aspect of the airport experience to make sure that we were doing everything we needed, from a cleaning protocol.
Right.
And then very busy raising money. And our finance folks came in working with your team and said, in one day, we're going to raise equity. We're going to sell some senior debt. We're going to issue some convertible debt. And in one day, I said, well, I'm an old CFO. I never did anything like that. Are you sure you can do this? They said, yep, and they did. And it, a lot of heroic acts like that.
Southwest is the only airline in the US industry that did not furlough a single employee during the pandemic. Hard decision or easy decision?
It was an easy decision to say that we do not want to furlough anyone. That was easy. We've been there before. That's what we said on 9/11. That's what we said during the Great Recession. And so we were working with our union leaders to have some relief. And if we couldn't get that, then we were going to be forced to do furloughs. But fortunately, the federal government came through with a second round of payroll support, and then we stabilized in the first quarter of 2021. So thankfully, by making it the last thing, we were able to avoid it. I'm very, very grateful for that.
Absolutely. Looking ahead, coming out of the pandemic, what do you think the US airline industry looks like maybe in 12 months and in 3 years?
I don't know. There's a number of messy aspects of our life right now. It's difficult to hire people, as an example. Normally, we'd be a lot more confident about, we'll be able to hire this many people, train this many people, deploy these airplanes. And right now, we're much more cautious because of the hiring situation. So that's one. And then on the demand side, it feels like the wave is turning over. Assuming the pandemic is under better control in 12 months, I think that we'll see very strong leisure travel. I feel very confident about that. I'm less confident about business travel. Right now, business travel is still off from 2019 levels, roughly 65%, 65%. Is business travel going to go away? Absolutely not. But I think that's the big question about the 12 and 16 months is, what will that mix look like?
I want to turn to the future of flying. I think it's fair to say that many industries and companies have been surprised at the pace at which ESG and sustainability trends have really accelerated in recent years and really started influencing consumer behavior. It's not something that's really hit the airline industry just yet, but you're starting to see the very first signs of that with concerns about carbon emission, the focus on SAF. What do you think this industry needs to do to be at the forefront of ESG trends?
First of all, we need to recognize that there's an issue there, and we do. And then we need to do something about it. So over the past 20 years, just through our own fleet modernization, retiring older technology aircraft, replacing with new, we've been able to reduce our carbon emissions per unit by 50%. And that's good progress. And that is a huge investment. So we were a launch customer of the Boeing MAX aircraft. It's 15% more fuel efficient, 15% less carbon emissions, and it will take us several decades to have the fleet transformed to the MAX. So that's number one. You mentioned sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF. Between now and 2050, now and 2030, that is the single biggest opportunity in terms of reducing carbon emissions. It's a life cycle benefit that you get from these biofuels, as much as a 50% reduction in carbon emissions and as much as 80% reductions. We also need to realize benefits from the air traffic control system modernization, where airplanes can spend less time in the sky, burning less fuel and therefore less carbon emissions. But absent those kinds of things, we'll still be emitting carbon every time we take off. Even though we're using, let's say 100% SAF, there are still carbon emissions. So a way that we're thinking about dealing with that is to pursue opportunities to capture carbon, sequester it.
In the 1950s and 60s, air travel was like a real luxury experience,
Yes.
like even flying in coach. Today, air travel is a lot more affordable, but passengers might say, hey, we have issues with legroom and the food's not great and maybe we're getting nickel and dimed. Again, this is not a Southwest issue, just to make it very clear. But how does this industry make flying fun again?
We just came along at a time where it was much more for the people instead of for the rich. Our answer is it's with our people. It just comes down to that personal touch, especially on board the aircraft, and just making each customer feel like they're a human being and not a transaction. Any effort like that, I think people instinctively know, they appreciate that you're trying to create a bond there, that you're trying to make my experience more pleasant. And we want to have comfortable seats. We want to have great onboard service. We want to have great Wi-Fi. All those things will continue to evolve. Travel can be anxious at times. So I think anything that we can do to streamline the experience, provide more information via your cell phone, up to date and accurate. We have a better technology foundation in place than ever to leverage from. So I think all those things going forward are very, very exciting.
You've worked alongside industry legends like Herb Kelleher and Colleen Barrett, and you are considered to be an industry legend yourself. At the end of this year, you will transition to executive chairman, and you will hand over the CEO role to Bob Jordan, CFO Tammy Romo, and the next generation of leaders at Southwest. So maybe, can you share with us what are some of your top priorities post-CEO?
I give myself credit for making a couple of good choices in my life. I married my high school sweetheart, and we're 45 years later, we're still married. That's and still love each other. And 10 years after we got married, I made the wise decision to join Southwest Airlines and work for Herb and Colleen. And never thought I would be sitting in this role. He was indeed legendary. I think he's just truly one of a kind. I'm grateful that I was able to have such a wonderful mentor like that. Herb stepped down as CEO in 2001 and remained executive chair for 7 years. I'll probably accelerate that a bit, just given the fact that Bob Jordan is a star. As for me, I'll continue to work in the governmental affairs area, and Herb did the same thing, and then lean in with strategy and planning and fleet and some of those more longer range kinds of topics, and just be here for advice and counsel. It'll be it's everybody graduates from high school eventually, and you expect your kids to get out of the house, and so okay, it's time for Gary to graduate and move on, and let the young guys do it. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited because I feel like they're ready.
Gary, this has been an absolutely wonderful, fascinating, insightful conversation. You've had a legendary career, but I can't wait for what is yet to come. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Ravi. I appreciate it.